I get so inspired when I hear about movies that are so different from the typical sort of Hollywood model, and there's a lot of junk, there's a lot of bad stuff that comes from filmmakers, but boy, this investigative documentary called The Red Sea Miracle celebrates the long celebrated Old Testament event that is, well, this is just very, very powerful. Tim Mahoney is an award-winning filmmaker. He's the founder of Thinking Man Films and Media. And it's kind of neat the way they're going to do this Red Sea Miracle. It's going to be in 2 parts. It's a Fathom event. It's going to be shown in theaters all over the country as a 2-part event. Part 1 investigates the journey to the different proposed crossing sites where the miracle of the Red Sea took place. Part 2 explores how the sea was parted and if there's any evidence remaining today. It's incredible stuff. Let's welcome on our guest line and on Skype, Tim Mahoney, to talk a little bit about the Red Sea Miracle. Tim, it's great having you on the Mike Gallagher Show. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me, Mike.
My pleasure. I get blessed every couple of years. I get to take a group of listeners to the Holy Land. Dennis Prager and I take hundreds of listeners about every 2 years or so. We're going to do it again in 2021. This past time, I think we took 615 listeners of ours to Israel. And we went to these sites. For example, in Jerusalem, they are now unearthing and they're being able to excavate parts of the city of David. They never did a lot of excavating there, and they're sort of in a mission to do that. And they're finding these incredible historical artifacts and reminders of what really did happen. One of the beauties, Tim, and the reason I say all this to you is one of the beauties of getting to go to Israel yourself is that the stuff that we've read about in the Bible, the things, the events, the events of the Bible come to life, and you are reminded this isn't a fairy tale, this is real. This did happen. And of course, people who challenge our Judeo-Christian nation like to say, "Oh, it's fairy tales, and you people are delusional." So I come to Patterns of Evidence production of the Red Sea Miracle, and I'm so embracing what you've done. 20 years you spent on a journey to produce to create this film, this 2-part movie. You got to tell us all about it, please. Give us the genesis of it, the how it played out, and what you discovered, Tim, about the Red Sea, the parting of the Red Sea.
Well, when I first went, I was actually starting on this film back in 2002. I actually went to Egypt to make the film that I've finally come to make 20 years later. But when I got there, I was told that there was no evidence for the Israelites in Egypt. And basically, when I heard that, I came home and actually had a crisis of faith. So the last 20 years has been my own personal journey. In fact, we call it the filmmaker's journey. And I was able to then take a whole new approach, and I found a way to investigate this by looking for patterns. And patterns are it's a scientific approach where you're looking for something. You say, can I find a pattern? And why is a pattern important is because there's a sequence to it. You'd have to have an A, B, C, D. And if you can find all that in the right sequence, and that's what we did with our first film on the Exodus. We did it with our second film on the Moses controversy. And now here we are. We're looking at the journey of the Israelites out of Egypt. Which direction did they go? What sea did they cross? And how did that miracle happen? Was there a parting of the sea? And if so, how did it happen? And there are 2 different groups. One is what I call the Egyptian approach, and the other one I call the Hebrew approach. And the Egyptian approach places the sea crossing at a reed sea near Egypt. And the Hebrew approach basically says, no, it's at a Red Sea. It's at the Gulf of Aqaba near Israel. And that's the tension in this investigation is which one matches the biblical text more accurately.
Wow. This process of investigating biblical miracles just fascinates me. And again, my point of reference in loving what you've done is, again, this excavation of the city of David, because let's face it, there are different competing worldviews. Muslims in Israel don't believe that Jesus, of course, was Savior, is Lord, and the whole thing that, for example, they've excavated this almost pristine path that went into the temple, and surely Jesus walked this path to get into the temple that everybody in Jerusalem went to, that everybody, and of course the Muslims say, no, if you find evidence, then that's confirming what we know historically to be true, but they refute that because they don't believe that it happened the way Christians and Jews believe it happened. And so I think I understand the importance of investigating biblical miracles, but it seems like you've sort of devoted your life to that process.
Yeah, I had no clue. Honestly, when I started this, it was really a one-year project. And little did I realize that my life, in fact, the great risks that would come to play, both financial and personal, to go on this investigation. But I started to realize that I was a part of the story, and a lot of other people were a part of it. And so I started putting my camera and interviewing the top archaeologists and scholars of the world. But I also interview Exodus explorers, because I was drawn to this story in 2002 when they said people were searching for chariot wheels on the bottom of the Red Sea. I'm like, what? From Pharaoh's army? You're looking for the remains of Pharaoh's army on the Red Sea? And that intrigued me. That began this investigation. But then there are other people that are very critical of the possibility that this could even have happened. And so this investigation is over the course of probably 30 years of different investigators, and I've collated all that together into this massive two-part investigation that begins on February 18th as a Fathom event. We're in over 800 theaters, and if you want to see a trailer, you can go to Patterns of Evidence. That's patternsofevidence.com. You can see a trailer and buy tickets. And we're encouraging people to bring their Sunday school class, their church, their family, bring that uncle who's an agnostic, and you'll have an awful lot to talk about after this. And it's a two-parter. So part one, February 18th, and then part two, we'll be looking at miracles even more closely. We're going to be looking at, is there any evidence that still remains on the seafloor? And how would water part? One group says it's natural, that wind blowing over a period of time will separate shallow water, and that's the Egyptian approach. It's at a reedy lake near the border of Egypt. But the other group says, no, it's at a deep sea, and it was miraculous. And those are the two views that we're going to be exploring in these two major epic films.
Tim Mahoney, who has investigated one of the greatest miracles of the Bible, the Red Sea, the parting of the Red Sea, with us on Skype and on our guest line. And again, as he said, you can go to patternsofevidence.com to find out where this is going to be shown at a theater near you. February 18th is part one. Tim, what was one of the most epic, sort of stunning, miraculous discoveries you uncovered as you made this film?
Well, everyone, I get to ask that question once in a while.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I think one of the things that was the hardest thing for me is the population size, because the Bible is telling us that there are over 600,000 men. And if that's the case, then this, with women and children, this would have been 2 to 3 million people. Now, this is the tension, again, that's happening in this investigation, is that other people are saying there's no way that this would be possible. But we see in the scripture that multiple places it's reaffirming that that large number of people. I think for me, the biggest challenge was, if this happened the way it is described in the Bible, of which I'm investigating, then it was beyond my imagination. In fact, it would have been miraculous, just the provision for these people in the wilderness. And I think for me, that started to tell me, well, maybe I've got some trouble. Maybe God can provide for my family as well. Do you get what I'm saying here?
I do. I mean, our faith is tested all the time. And we actually talk about that here on the radio show, where sometimes you say, how is this God's will? How could God have this? And we disagree with faith skeptics, people like Bill Maher, who has sort of had a cottage industry of denouncing people of faith and criticizing organized religion and Christians and Jews, everybody. And so that's why I think it's very important to see a movie like this, to see the Red Sea miracle. People of faith, sometimes we all need a little boost, and we need an affirmation of what we believe.
And I'll tell you what happened was, on one of my interviews, I was in Chicago talking to a theologian and a philosopher he's actually a philosopher, and I said, well, there's no evidence of miracles today. And he says, well, that's not true. He says there's actually Dr. Craig Keener has created a 2-volume set. I think he was co-part of this, and he has documented thousands of miracles. And we're going to explore the question of miracles in more exploring it deeper in the second part of the film. And we're going to actually, give testimony to the fact that miracles are still happening today. And they're not, I mean, science is basically saying, yeah, there's no way to explain this any other way than it was a miracle.
I can't wait to see it. I hope everybody does. Go to patternsofevidence.com. Again, this is a Fathom event. Theaters all over the country, February 18th. Put it on your calendar. That's next week. Patternsofevidence.com. Tim Mahoney, thank you for spending some time with us here on the Mike Gallagher Show. We wish you nothing but the best. I hope your work continues to be lifted up and successful beyond your wildest imagination. I'm glad you could join us.
Thanks for having me.
All the best.